Welcome back, everybody, to the Smooth Brain Society. Today, in the theme of having two guests on for the past few weeks, again, I have two incredible guests who are recording from New Zealand. Uh, the first is Behrouz Boochani. He is a Kurdish-Iranian journalist, human rights defender, writer, and film producer who is living in New Zealand. He was held in the Australian-run Manus Island detention center in Papua New Guinea from 2013 until its closure in 2017. In July 2020, he became a senior adjunct research fellow at the University of Canterbury. Boochani is the co director, along with Iranian filmmaker Arash Kamali Sarvestani, of the documentary Chauka, Please Tell Us the Time. He has published numerous works on the plight of refugees held by the Australian government on Manus Island. His memoir, No Friend But the Mountains, written from Manus Prison, has won the Victorian Prize for Literature and the Victorian Premier's Prize for Nonfiction in January 2019. Uh, Abdul Samad Haidari is a poet, writer, teacher, and journalist. He served as a freelance journalist and humanitarian aid worker in areas of Afghanistan that remain dangerous to civilians because of influence of terrorist groups. Abdul served with the Norwegian Refugee Council, Action Aid Afghanistan, Daily Outlook Afghanistan group of newspapers, and the Daily Afghanistan Express. As a journalist, Abdul wrote articles and editorials about on the ground realities in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which were then circulated widely. These had a particular focus on women and children's rights, corruption, transparency, and accountability in government and terrorist group actions, and the systematic persecution of minority groups in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. He fled and sought refuge in Indonesia, where he lived as a stateless refugee for 9 years and now lives and works in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So thank you, both of you, for coming on. I feel like I have two celebrities on with me today. So thank you. Welcome to the Smooth Brain Society.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Sahir, for having us tonight.
So awesome. I gave the more sort of the Wikipedia introductions, if you will.
Mhm.
But if you guys could give us a little bit of a background into sort of your lives, of course, both coming from refugee backgrounds, both coming from minority backgrounds in your countries. If you could enlighten our listeners with sort of that sort of idea, so we have some historical context from which we can take the conversations forward, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's great to be here. I'm Kurdish, and probably many people know that Kurdish people live in Middle East, but we are uh, divided, between four countries. So I'm from the Iranian side. We are like probably more than 30 million population, but most of Kurds live in the Turkey side, but in Iranian side we are at least 8 million people. So that is my background, and I think that's really important because being a Kurd or born in as a Kurd has impacted on my life and on uh, my personal life and also on my political perspective, the way I understand the world, the way I uh, approach to art and literature and writing, because I born in a colonialism context and grew up in that system, and I fled Iran. I left Iran because of that, because that caused my journey. And then I went to Indonesia. I was there for like 2 months, and then I took on a boat and I went to Australia. But when I arrived in Australia, I realized that the law has changed. So they have a new policy, which in Australia they call it 19 July policy, which means anyone who come to Australia by boat, they banish them to Manus Island in north of Papua New Guinea and to Nauru Island. So I was banished to Manus Island. I was there for like 6 years. So in the introduction, you mentioned that the Manus was closed at 2017. That is just an official
Mm.
statement, but actually Manus was closed in 2019, and then they transferred all of us to Port Moresby, which is the capital city of Papua New Guinea. And from there, I was there for like 2 months, and then I came to New Zealand. I was invited by World Festival in Christchurch, and I moved to New Zealand. But still, right now that I'm talking with you, still there are 30 people who are in Port Moresby and are waiting to be transferred to other countries. So still is ongoing policy. So that is my whole story in a very short time.
Yeah. I On a personal note, I just find it very funny that countries like Australia, where majority of the people there were all sent there on boats, all of a sudden don't like other people coming there on boats. I find it sort of ironic, and yeah, antithetical. Oh, I'm in the UK at the moment, and there's a big push these days, political push to stop people coming into the country, coming in on boats, refugees, migrants, asylum seekers of any sort. And yeah, that's why I thought that it would be a great time to have this discussion with two people who experience the difficulty. And also the other thing, like you said, that the law had changed by the time you showed up. um and yeah, with people who are leaving their countries, they're going, you I'm assuming you would have taken a lot of risks to get to where you to even make it to Australia. um and sort of the idea that for some reason they're following the news and know exactly what rules are being changed throughout this entire process would deter people who are making months long, year long journeys. I don't necessarily see how that's really a deterrent or helps anybody.
Yeah, definitely. There are many things about Australian refugee policy to say and discuss. You are right. Some people said, once I read, it said that because you are an island, that's why we come by boat, because we cannot come by bicycle or car or train. You are an island, so if we want to go to reach to that island, we should get in the boat, you know. But definitely, there is a very deep historical context, and there is a definitely a colonialism uh, mentality there. So we can, if we have a chance, talk about this, and also how Australia has become like an example to other countries such as UK, and now we see United States. They are looking at Guantanamo Bay as a place that they banish refugees there. And you know that Guantanamo actually has roots. I mean, Guantanamo prison has roots in refugees policies. So long time ago, I think it was 1991 or two, they the first group of people who they banished there were refugees. So I haven't read about the before that, but I am sure that Guantanamo has a long history uh, to for refugees policies, and they push refugees and send them there. So there are a lot to say about this policy, and definitely Australia is very uh, interesting. Of course, it's painful, but it's very interesting example to be discussed in this context.
Speaking of the USA, and I wanted to I can ask Abdul to talk about a little bit of his journey, because whenever you hear Afghanistan, it's mostly until, in at least in the recent history since 2001, has always been in the context of the United States. But of course, the history goes back a lot further. Um, and if you could give us a little bit of background into your journey as well, Abdul, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Sahir. And if that is okay, I would like to open that small introduction with a poetry, and after that, just give a little bit about myself.
Of course, of course.
And uh, this poem defines where I come from, and it talks about uh, beyond my identity and language. And this has no title yet, but it goes: I come from the wild gem gates of Wonderland, with mountains tall as your dreams. I opens my eyes in the grasp of all seasons, where garden of rare roses, lilac labor of laughter, fill cups of your life and make you whole. I am the blossom of wild almonds, with clear rills of musky scents in the roots of my curly hair. I carry all the colors your eyes can behold, the misty aroma in the air, the breath your lungs long to praise. My name is Abdul, and I belong to the Hazara ethnic community in Afghanistan. And as a member of the Hazara community, of course, we have been uh, facing ethnic cleansing and genocide for a very long time. And perhaps before I was born, and when I was born, there was a genocide, and genocide still continues up to this date. And as a result of this continuous genocide, my family members, they became refugees. They were displaced within the country. I lost a little sister in that process of ethnic cleansing in Afghanistan, and I became refugee at a very early age, 10 or 11 years old. So I have been wandering across borders since then, and I became a child laborer at the age of 11 in Iran at the construction sites. I was made to stand in a live shooting line in Kandahar, Afghanistan, close to Kandahar, during the 1990s. And of course, I returned in Afghanistan in 2007, thinking that the security situation had improved and that I could help my people to rebuild our country. And I started my journalism. I started my career in journalism, and I did journalism in Afghanistan. And as a result of journalism, again, I had to leave Afghanistan, and I became a refugee again. And I ended up in Indonesia, of course. And I spent in Indonesia almost 10 years with no clear fate or certain future. And that is my journey. And I arrived in Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2023. And I am 2 years old in this country.
That was awesome. Few things which you said really sort of stood out to me. One is you said that you went back, and it brought to me like sort of the thoughts, and hopefully you guys can speak to it, that hope of wanting to go back to, like, you had gone back to Afghanistan. Of course, the goal of refugees to wanting to go back to their countries, and basically not being able to, for because of the situation on the ground there. And it also oh it also comes to the I keep bringing it back to what I see currently in the news and politics, where it's always like, why are they coming here? Why don't they just stay back? They just want to leave. But your story clearly shows that someone who's wanted to go back and for various reasons hasn't been able to, or has gone back and then has had to leave again. um so does, how does it feel now that and of course Behrouz can also answer this question, how does it feel now that you guys are in Aotearoa? Does the refugee journey sort of end when you get to sort of a Western country, into like Aotearoa or in the UK? What is the story done once you end on these shores, or is there a lot more to it?
Do you go, Behrouz, or I
Yeah,
go?
yeah, okay. I think that is a very good question, and because people think that when you just reach to a safe place or in a place that you are able to start a new life, so that is done. But actually, you know, because of your background and your experience as a refugee, so of course refugees have different backgrounds. But for example, in my case, before I reached to New Zealand, I was in prison for 6 years. So that's definitely impacted on me. And but of course, it's hard to start a new life. Depends on your background. If you be an educated person, probably is much easier, or even it can be difficult uh, compared to others. If you be like younger, probably, and I'm sure is much easier to find your way. But when you are older, of course, you have a long history back home, and you carry that, and you come to a totally different place, and you should start a new life. So all of these, knowing the language, struggling with the language, finding friends, network, finding a community, finding a like having an opportunity to contribute to the society, to the new society. All of this is depends to where you come from and your background as a person, because people are different, and for some people is much difficult, is for some people is easier, or but still, as a refugee, I think there is a difference between a refugee and a migrant, because a refugee accepted or must accept that cannot go back to his or her homeland. That is really different. But when you are a migrant, you decided to come, to move, to start a journey, and you are able to go back sometimes, or even you can go back forever. But as a refugee, you must start a new life in the new society. That is a huge difference. But generally, the of course is very difficult, and it depends to the country that is hosting you as well. Some societies are more multicultural, uh, is much easier. Some countries are not. For example, in Wellington, that we live, or in Aotearoa, New Zealand, my understanding is compared to Australia is less multicultural, and that of course that make it more difficult. to start a new life, because people here are not really familiar. For example, uh, still in Wellington, which is a very progressive city, whenever I meet people, I can say that 99% of people that I meet, when I talk, after few words, they say that, "Where are you from? What is that
Mm.
accent?" So, of course, this is a very random question for them, but for people like us, it's very difficult. Always, you should answer that, so that it's tiring. And it's not only me, I met many people, even European people who came here. They always complain about that, and that shows actually people here don't used to see people with a different background compared to, for example, a city like London. I think in a city like London, probably people have a different reaction when they meet each other. But here, they really people want to know. They are really interested to know where are you from, and they want to know about the place you come from. So the whole conversation, uh, like, start or shape around who you are and where you come from, uh, which is fine. I don't have problem with that generally, but I know that most of people have problem with that because it's tiring. Always should answer this question all the time. So I mean, just generally, as a refugee, you have you face many challenges, and so I'm sure that Abdul will talk about this. So Abdul wants to bring his family, and you know that's a different case compared to me. That I don't want to
Yeah.
bring my family, so I don't have that problem. But I mean, compared to your background, your position, uh, you know, we are individual. We have different background and cases, but generally, of course, we have a same experience as well in many ways to start a new life. But it depends to the society as well, the place that you is hosting you. So that's very different. But generally, there are many challenges for a person, a refugee, to start a new life. It's a long journey, but sometimes people say that I complain too much, but that is not complaint. This is we just want to talk about these challenges that people have a better understanding,
Yeah.
or is not complaining.
For me, so here I would like to go back to your a little bit of explanation about people complaining about refugees, why making a lot of different statements saying that people are willingly leaving the countries, refugees are willingly leaving their countries. We have to understand the fact that there is a 1951 convention. According to the UN 1951 convention, refugees are those who are forced to flee their home countries because of war, uh, racism, discriminations, and being a member of political group. And there are five reasons. And if someone falls in one of those categories and leaving the country, which means the person is forced to leave the country. And I'm 100% sure that people would not just easily give up on everything and the soil that you are born in, and the family, friends, bonding with the land is it is just like a soul with the flesh of the human being. So it is impossible to detach flesh from the skeleton, or from the soul. And then at the same time, refugees don't have any choice over their destinations. And there are a lot of
Hmm.
articulations about refugees that they are choosing and going to specific countries to go to these specific countries. I think it is very unfair to make those statements without being walking a single mile of the refugees and asylum seekers when they leave their home countries. When I left my country, I was bleeding. I was injured, I was wounded, and I tried 4 times to stay in my home country. 4 times I was forced to leave the country, and I didn't have any other place anywhere else to go. And then finally, the destination chose me, and I ended up in Indonesia. And it was not my decision to go and end up in Indonesia and live my life for 10 years in the prison. I didn't wish that. I don't think any common mind or rationally thinking any common rational person would choose to go and end up in prison and spend to 10 years of life, most fruitful years of your life in the prison. I don't think anybody chooses that. Then refugees are not choosing any destination. Refugees are not choosing any directions. Refugee directions and destinations all choose refugees. When you leave the country, you fall in the hands of the people you're not sure. You're not even 5% sure that you would ever make to a safe destination. There's no guarantee for that. You might die in the jungle. You might be killed. You might be, you know, you might face different consequences. You might get drowned in the sea. So all of those things are possible. You may get detained and never get released in one of those countries who are not hosting refugees. And for me, the second phase is most of the refugees, most of the host countries, majority of the hosting countries, they have very hostile policies against refugees and asylum seekers. And hostile in a sense that, for example, in Indonesia, refugees are not allowed to work. Refugees are not allowed to have a bank account. Refugees are not allowed to enroll at schools, universities. Refugees are not even allowed to register a mobile SIM card. Refugees are not even allowed to drive. Refugees are not allowed to get married and form a family. Refugees have no access to legal support. Something happens to you and you don't have the right to go and stand in front of the court and ask for justice. So these are, I don't think any rational person choose to live in that kind of situation unless you have no other option. You have really no other options, and you choose, in spite of those challenges, choose to stay. In the meantime, while you are staying in those countries, it is like it is a cage. It is a cage with open doors. It is exactly, just a cage with open doors. You can't fly, you can't get out of the cage. At the same time, there are systems who are extremely oppressive dealing with the refugees and asylum seekers, and very dehumanizing at the same time. So with the passage of time, you are not losing only the numbers of the years, and you are not losing only the best years of the life. You're losing most of yourself. The dehumanization system completely turns you into an empty shell. You lose the confidence, you lose a lot of things in that process. It's a very difficult process. And then once you get resettled, so the resettlement it is, of course, as Behrouz earlier mentioned, it depends on the society that are hosting refugees. But I believe that resettlement is not the end of a refugee's journey. That is the start of challenges. That is the start of struggle. And you say, and I say, why? Because when you come, the government and the society, they expect from you to function as a very established, as a very smart, as a very well performing person, not understanding that what we have gone through, the amount of dehumanization, the amount of confidence that we lost on this process. We are absolutely scared of everything. People are scared, talking about some of the things, touching a little bit about refugees or this policy and that policy. That really scares people. Refugees still, it becomes a part of our lives. For example, now I am safe, but I am constantly struggling to bring my family members, and the Pakistani government is deporting refugees, and then the Taliban are threatening and because of my writing. And I lost two family members in 2 years back to back. So I really don't know where to go. And it is not a very small process, and it's not a very easy process. The system is sometimes very complicated to deal with. And I am safe, but the feeling of guilt and the feeling of regret really haunts me every moment of my life. When I walk, and I really feel empty, and I really feel like I really wish my mother and siblings were beside me. At least I didn't have to worry. My half part of my life, or maybe 60% of my energy, is spent on the family reunification applications and other documents. So that really becomes exhausting with the passage of time. So it is not the end of all worries and the end of everything. And I believe it is the start of struggle, as Behrouz said. People with young ages, they might be able to cope with that, and maybe they are young, and then maybe the system, or the the oppression, or the dehumanizing system may get out of the body and minds very quickly. But with people, a little bit mature, understanding and processing those things, it will take a while to adjust in the community, in the society, and to understand the culturally appropriateness of the society that you are living amongst. These are the challenges, I think, that stretch on and on and on.
Now that was very well put by both of you guys. There were a lot of similarities in terms of, oh, going back to what Behrouz said, the "where are you from" sort of question. It
Right.
seems simple, but it carries a lot of weight.
Very
And
good.
I have no refugee background, but I have a migrant background, with my parents coming from India, but me being born in New Zealand, but then me living around the world, and people asking where you're from. Whatever answer you give is, you always see, like, it's not necessarily what they wanted, or not what they're expecting you to give, and then that causes its own challenges. And then when you add the additional level of having been forced out of where you were from, it opens another thing. It opens a whole another layer. With that in mind, and Abdul, you were speaking a lot about your family. um are there certain conditions which would want you guys to go back to your homeland, because you guys came when you were slightly older? Abdul, on your last time, and Behru said you left uh, as an adult. um are there any situations or conditions which would make you want to go back, or is it more about getting your family's friends out?
For me, it is about my family members, and if I return, where to go, uh, and that is the process of the resettlement for the refugees. When you go through a different process, there is RSD, refugee status determination interview, and you go through those all things, and you get resettled, and you get resettled for the safety reason. And if the whole point is to return back to the country, then I don't think anyone would leave, and I don't think I would have left in the very first place. So for me, there's no space, and unless I became maybe a member of the Taliban group to satisfy them, and to aid us, and to be able to survive. That there's no other way for me particularly to return to Afghanistan. But my whole effort is now, even my family members is now under threat, and I'm struggling to move them, evacuate them wherever possible. And I don't have any access to any other countries except appealing, begging, and pleading before the government. Look, this is the situation, and I don't have any big power. I don't have anything else, and I can't do anything. So this is, for me, this is the process of the family reunification, and I have spent most of my life separated from my family members. It is just when anytime I talk to about family members, when everybody, people, friends, they talk, okay, where have you spent your holiday? Oh, with family members, going here and there. And then really, that really, I'm not, it is not that I'm very unhappy for them. I'm so happy, I'm so glad for them, that they have the opportunity going and spending some times with their family members to heal and to flourish, and to come to regain that energy. But for me, it is just like just a pinch of salt and chili rubbing on the open wounds, and it is that difficult. What happened to them? Where are they? Are they going to make it through the next day? These are the things that come into my head.
Just one thing I wanted to mention. So even you be able to go back, uh, that place that you left probably long time ago is not the same. So, so I mean, as a refugee is an ongoing challenge, which is sometimes is existentialist challenge. So, and you deal with that, but I myself, I find it, of course, it's difficult, but I find it meaningful as well in many ways because that means you can or you are able to have a unique political perspective. The way that you understand politics, the way you understand life and society is different, is unique because no one is in your position as a refugee. You are already marginalized in the society. Already you have a title as a refugee,
Yeah.
a title that is it's been dehumanized, criminalized for decades. Look at like someone like Trump, the way that his people in his administration, the way they talk about refugees, they put people alongside criminals, and they repeat it all the time. And the main media follow that. The media actually doesn't matter right or left. All of them, the mainstream media are following that language, and that definitely impact on refugees. The image that people have about refugees because they criminalize it. So I mean, all of these shape our political perspective, the way we understand the world, the way we approach to the, you know, even our daily life. So I mean, that can be very unique in many ways because we experience the dark side of what we call liberal democracy. We experience that. So we experience a kind of violence which is often an invisible violence. We experience that, and sometimes in our daily life. And so, of course, we understand the whole system from a different position, from a unique position. And not only refugees, just generally minorities, marginalized people. It's quite interesting. This is my understanding of the politic. Just generally this world. Wherever I go, I visited Europe um, two times for like doing conferences and events, and some other countries. This is my experience. Wherever I go, or I suggest to people, wherever we go to different countries, different societies, if we want to really understand that country in a deeper way, I think we should go and have a conversation like I mean, in a, like a casual trip or when we travel, uh, the minorities in that society, marginalized people in that society, they have a better or unique understanding of that country, you know. But mainstream is not like that. So, for example, uh, people in this country, like Maori people, have a different the way they experience this system. It's very different to like what we call Pakiha person in this country. So different. So that's why you know, this is my style. Wherever I go, I manage to, if I want to, like in like a casual conversation, to understand something about that country, that I'm there for a few days or a week, just manage to talk with minorities. They have a, you know, they offer you something unique about that country.
Yeah, that's very well put. You both of you mentioned sort of this essentially, which spoke to this idea of systemic oppression, and both of you have written about it. Behrouz, I know you spoke about something called the Manus Prison Theory. Uh, a, a lot. And I wanted to get to that. So if you could just sort of explain what it is. Sorry, I'm jumping from topic to topic as well because it's a shorter conversation. But yeah, if you could just quickly touch upon what the theory is, and then maybe we can speak about that a little bit.
So let's say it in a different way so the audience can go and read about it.
Of course.
Uh, it's actually the first time that come from an article that I wrote a long time ago. The title of the article is Manus Prison Theory. And in that article, you can find it on internet. The Manus Prison Theory, in that article, what I did, I compared Manus Prison with the film I, Daniel Blake by Ken Loach. So that film, I like that film, but of course my article was not about cinema. My article was about content. So I used the film as an example, and I compared these two. And in that uh, article, I try to explain that how Manus has many twins in the like free societies, like in this world that we live in. Uh, how how the system in Manus is bureaucratic with many rules, and in this free society we see that as well. You know, we see many systems, including universities as well, quite similar to Manus. So generally, Manus prison system or theory is about how we should understand Manus prison as a very harsh version of like prison beyond Manus prison. Like I mean that we find other like twins or similarity between Manus and other systems in the society. And Manus prison is a system of control, and we see that in the, you know, out of Manus in this free society we have that version as well. That, you know, in many systems how we are under watch, we are controlled by the system, and even when we go to like a shop, we do shopping, you know, we go through a process. So I mean, just generally, that is Manus prison theory. but we can interpret it in different way as well, which is Manus Prison. And Omid Tofighian, that translated my book and we worked together. He developed that theory as well. He worked on it, and I know that some other academic have written about it. So it's like an ongoing conversation for some people. But Manus Prison is it can be Manus Prison Theory. It can be about the knowledge that created by refugees in a collective resistance, and that knowledge it can be a unique political perspective or contribution as well. So it's not only me. There are many people in Manus who've been writing and creating like artwork. So that is a very, many books written by refugees, many and people who work with refugees, many artworks created. So there is a huge body of work there for people who are interested and want to understand more about Australia's system and Manus and Nauru as well. Sorry, it was supposed to be short. I was aware of it.
No, no, no. I think that's very good. And of course, people, like you said, there's so much art. Of course, Abdul's poems and books will be linked. Your article and all will be linked in the description for people to listen to as well. Uh, Abdul, I feel what Behrouz was saying sort of linked in a lot to what you were talking, particularly about your time in Indonesia. But I mean, some of the other work which you also said, and I remember my conversation with Kodri and Isha a few episodes ago, where he sort of spoke about the rules and things which refugees face, which probably other not people who are migrants as well don't necessarily face. Their education when their degree is not working, or what certain prisoners face, like not being able to have a cell phone or anything like that. Um, how does your experience map onto this idea as well as I'm trying to picture it in my head?
Well, Indonesia has a very interesting history about the refugees and asylum seekers. But though it is refugees are living in the communities, and but not necessarily all refugees are living in the communities. Most of the refugees are living in the refugee camps. Uh, it is. It is not exactly similar to where Behrouz was, but it is as oppressive and as difficult as almost that place. Since I arrived in Indonesia until I left Indonesia, 34 refugees ended their life in Indonesia because they couldn't resist anymore, and some of them they had severe headache, and they passed away in Indonesia. But there was no. The interesting part is there was no investigation ever held, and there was no announcement or some kind of uh, report about what really happened with the refugees in Indonesia from the organizations that are collaborating with the UNHCR, or working alongside for the refugees and asylum seekers. Uh, the reason I started writing in Indonesia was similar to that one. And my first book, of course, talks about genocide, talks about colonization back home in Afghanistan, and how they confiscated our lands and how they forced us from our motherlands, and also talking about refugees in Indonesia. And yes, it is quite an interesting place. And the interesting part is people do not talk a lot about refugees in Indonesia, but people have done a lot. Refugees and asylum seekers, they have done a lot in Indonesia. Most of the refugees, and we established some educational spaces for the refugee children, at least when the government denied allowing refugee children and asylum seekers to enroll at schools. At least we could do that. Just created some spaces for the refugees to go and study. But for the male members, there is no chance. There is nothing. It's not about qualification. Having a qualification degree or not, you are not even allowed to enroll at any institution because of your refugee status. Though refugee status is being granted by the United Nations High Commissions for Refugees, and so the government at some point is collaborating with the UNHCR and the UN bodies working with for the refugees in Indonesia. Yet refugees are, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain laws and restrictions being imposed on refugees, and people couldn't uplift those restrictions. But of course, people wrote about their experiences in Indonesia and created a lot of art about refugees in Indonesia. And yes.
No, you guys have both mentioned now the art. Abdul, of course, recited a poem earlier as well. Phil, you guys, filmmakers, writers. What is the role of art in sort of the bringing forward the, I want to say, the plight of refugees, the or refugee stories and the resistance, as you had mentioned?
Abdul, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. For me, it is just to expose some of the invisible hidden shadows to the people who have not heard or seen, who haven't experienced yet that, but mainly following the mainstream media, who are portraying refugees in a very, as Behrouz said, negative way. And there is one interesting experience for me in Indonesia. One day, I was invited to an event, a function, family function, and the event, the party was done, and then they asked me to stay there, and I stayed there, and we talked a little bit about refugees and about the challenges for the refugees in Indonesia. And then after maybe 40, 45 minutes conversation, and then she was in her early 70s or 65, and she looked at me in the eye and said, Abdul, I am not afraid of refugees. And I was absolutely shocked with that statement. And so that is the image. So many negative images of the refugees have been shown and portrayed and articulated amongst the people who haven't experienced the reality. But the reality is something different. Art and poetry is to expose the truth, nothing more than truth. And I think that is the last option for most of the refugees, as I have experienced in Indonesia. You have the last option, and you have no power against anything. The only power that you have, the freedom of thought. Even the freedom of thought is sometimes not fully practiced. For example, with my first book, when I published my first book was destroyed in a sense that when I submitted the first manuscript, the manuscript was published instead of the final edited version of the book. And that means that it is not something, a very big publisher in Indonesia publishes the manuscripts and saying that it was a fault, it was a mistake. But that is how the system works. They try every possible option to demonize you and to shut your voice and to disappoint you, so that you do not continue writing about your experiences and expose the truth in that system. So it is just about exposing the truth, nothing more than that, and fighting for the sake of survival. And there is just that little hope, and that little hope writing and producing something that the society, it is it is not only about surviving, it is not only about resistance, it is also about giving the real picture of what is really happening on the ground. And also you are challenging a vast, a very major media stream, in a sense that, well, you're writing about these things and you are portraying refugees and the situation in Indonesia that way, but that is not the way, that's not the reality, and this is the reality. And for example, there were a lot of stories and saying that refugees came to Indonesia just to go to Australia. Might be, for some, might be, family members. They have a majority of the family members are in one country, and some of the family members are left. A mother is left behind, or a brother is left behind, who is also under threat, and might have ended up in Indonesia. But for majority of refugees, it's not the case. People ended up in Indonesia, and even if North Korea was beside bordered with Indonesia, and people have ended up in Indonesia, they would still seek asylum and refuge in that country. Uh, you know, so it is about exposing the reality and unveiling the truth and the invisible truths that most of the mainstream media are not very much interested to touch or portray, bring to the attention of the audience outside those prisons or those circumstances.
You mentioned a couple of examples of having difficulty in bringing the voice to the mainstream media. For example, you mentioned your book and publishing with that. Behrouz, have you also found sort of resistance like that? I mean, it's already hard to compete when Donald Trump or the prime minister of a country says something and media covers it completely versus someone coming out of refugee camps trying to say the real truth. Like, there seems to be a disconnect in general. There's a power imbalance of who people are going to listen to, and then there's also that sort of barriers. Well, one which Abdul mentioned, but did you also face it throughout your entire career, and are you still facing it?
Yeah, I think mainstream media, I think that is their nature to make things uh, superficial, sometimes dramatic, sometimes it's like that. So I don't think that I'm comfortable in mainstream media. I don't say that if I have a platform there, I don't use it. Always I use it, in mainstream media. But I think the true movement, not only for refugees, for all of the social movements, should come from within the community, like a bottom of the society, and how people make a network, like underground network, and that is the main power. So mainstream media is, of course, is a part of the challenge, is part of the problem, but I think they are losing their power these days. And so we should just use our small platforms to just share ideas. I think those ideas will go around, and that will create some change. So I don't I don't mean that when I say change. Of course, the aim is to create like fundamental change, but we we should be able to recognize and see the small changes that we make, and I think that comes from the bottom of the society, not from the mainstream. But you know I like to be in mainstream media as well sometimes, but I'm not comfortable there, which is good, which is very good. Don't be comfortable in those platforms. And when you are not comfortable, that means you make them uncomfortable as well. So that's great.
Oh, I mean, we say mainstream media, but then there's also the most famous podcast these days, the most famous other forms of sort of media these days also tends to, at least in my view, sort of promote things which are said. So I think the most obvious example is the sort of Joe Rogan siding with Donald Trump one. But then I feel that filters down throughout other media as well, where that sort of fear and hate seems to get more, and sort of the message of love making systemic change is either lost or is directed in the wrong way.
So Abdul, I have no comment about that. So I mean, we should use all the opportunities that we have to at least share our ideas. So
Yeah.
that's sometimes even when you talk just with a person in the bus station. So I mean, people. Uh, I think people have access to ideas these days is much easier. So I mean, people who want to listen to like what radical ideas, they are able to find it. So that's why. But that is my understanding. But generally, it's quite a stupid word. I don't like it. It's full of technology and social media apps. It's quite crazy. AI, all of these. But I think people who want to hear some new ideas or radical ideas are able to find it.
Don't listen to everything Behrouz said. Follow, like, subscribe the podcast on all social medias. Don't delete them. That's how we get our reach. Sorry, Abdul, did you have anything to add to that?
I think, as Behrouz said, uh, I come from, mountainous regions, and I was born in that kind of region. And during my childhood, I spent most of my time communicating with the nature, being in the nature. But it is not like I am totally against the mainstream media. There are some opportunities, of course, but as Behrouz said, you will get a lot of radical ideas from through social media, and at the same time, uh, the mainstream media also provides a platform for everybody to share his, her, their own stories in their own way. And as Behrouz earlier mentioned, that some are losing the power, and they are losing the power because when the report is coming, and then from the wheelchaired communities, and then when another report comes from the ground, on the ground realities, that creates a totally conflict of reality, and you see totally something different. And I think when we are talking about the technology, and I think producing a book and writing a story, and recording something and doing artwork and exposing, and people have different capabilities, people have different approaches. Some speak through arts, some speak through poetry, some speak through stories, some speak through photographs. And I think for me, I spoke well when I realized in Indonesia that I did not have the right to practice my journalism, and I just shifted my journalism. And my writing is, of course, the continuation of my journalism, which means I did not give up, and I still continue. So I spoke through poetry, so that poetry, the printed version, the digital version, it goes outside, and that is also a kind of maybe a little bit of old school approach, but that is a different approach, reaching to the audience with the solid uh, reality or practical experiences that comes from the person who has been in that particular situation, broadcasting that particular situation, environment, and experiences, and that circulates well around the world and reaches everyone who is willing to interact and know more. That is my understanding about the mainstream and technologies.
Awesome thoughts from both of you guys. Thank you for those perspectives. In the interest of time, um, we will. I think we should start wrapping up now. And in the interest of that, I just wanted both of you to sort of share your final thoughts and messages for our audience, for anybody listening. I know Abdul wanted to end with a poem, so maybe I'll let Behrouz go first. If you could give us a little final thoughts, sort of hopes for the future, uh, and then Abdul can finish.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. I don't know really what to say to people, but probably I should ask people. It's good for you that people just share this video if they like it. Probably that is more practical rather than I say that let's be hopeful, let's we are good to go. Just even sharing this video if you like it to others with others, I think that's great. That empower this, you know, our voice, or yeah, share it if you like it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't like it, also share it. Maybe someone else will like it.
No, I think that if you don't like it, don't share it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you like it, share it.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Abdul, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And I would really, before reciting a poem, I would like to encourage everyone to be kind, to be strong, particularly refugees who are in the refugee camps, refugees who are in a very difficult situation. Stay strong and use the resources that you have very wisely. Be patient and be kind to your surroundings, be kind to yourselves. There will be always a light ahead. Always there will be a way out, and eventually you will get out of that situation. But look after yourselves, be kind, and keep practicing the gesture of kindness, respect, and understanding in the society that you are living. And I would like to recite a poem from my recently published book called The Unsent Condolences. This poem talks about we come across so many labels about refugees and asylum seekers. They are defining us in so many different ways. When they see as a refugee, as Behrouz said, they always think of refugees just bringing some good food and that's all. But refugees have much more to offer to the society. They come with visions, they come with hope, they come with creativity, they come with skills, and they come with so many beautiful gifts, heritage that they carry with them throughout their journey. And this poem talks about refugees. This is called I Am But More Than a Refugee. I am but a poet, harvesting in the garden of ghazals, a guide to the toast vapor of noises unhurt, the blooming sea of awakening dreams, the ultimate sense of life and joy, reciting again the tongues of youth. I am but the eminent arrival of all seasons, the mesmerizing spring, the harvested summer, the purpled autumn, the herald of winter. I am that fine morning zephyr, emitting the reviving aroma of summer. Sparrows take flight in my laughter, and butterflies emerge from the cocoons at my arrival. I am but a tuneful flute from night, knower of unknown tunes, singer of unrhymed songs. My voice may not be the sweetest of all, but carries the glory of Maulana's melodies, Rumi otherwise. My fingers are the strings of Egyptian oud, dancing in unison, bouncing with delight, forming music from nothing. I am but a journalist, the lot of my own words, giving volumes to moral and righteous voices. I am engaged, remain curious, firm and utterly prepared, because I am but more than a refugee. Kia ora.
Kia ora. That was beautiful. One final time, thank you, Abdul. Thank you, Behrouz, so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. I really appreciated this conversation. I wish it could have gone on longer, but um, time zone differences. Now that hopefully I can have you all back on and continue the conversations further because there's a lot more to talk about. There, like you said, the journey doesn't end. So therefore, the conversations don't end. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Um,
Thank you, everybody, for listening as well. And take care until the next episode.